All right, good afternoon, everybody. It is Monday, September 8th, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and this is Admissions Live. I'm your host, Chris Dorso. Today on the show, my guests are Lance Merker, who is the President and CEO of Omni Update, and Stephanie Geyer, who is the Vice President of Web Strategy and Interactive Marketing Services at Noel Levitz. And we are talking about one of the biggest events of the year for us enrollment marketing, enrollment communication folks, and that is the EExpectations report, which came out this summer. Admissions Live is part of the Higher Ed Live Network, a series of professional development web shows and podcasts that are always free and accessible to you, both in our archives at higheredlive.com as well as on iTunes. You can be a part of our broadcast by tuning in live and sharing your insights and questions using the Higher Ed Live hashtag on Twitter, and you can also receive weekly updates with live show dates and times by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. You can do all that at higheredlive.com. Today's show would not be possible without the support of all of my colleagues here at Stony Brook and as well as our friends at M. Stoner. All of our Higher Ed Live shows, including Admissions Live, are produced by M. Stoner, a marketing communications firm, works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. In September, M. Stoner is hosting a complimentary webinar focused on optimizing your design eye. No Photoshop experience is required, and we are going to send out a link on Twitter where you can learn more and register for that. In the ever-changing and competitive field of enrollment management, you need to stand out, and ACU's Graduate Certificate in Enrollment Management has been designed specifically for this purpose. Take the next step to becoming an emerging leader in the profession by gaining the skills and knowledge necessary to set yourself apart. Flexible enough for working professionals, this online program can be completed in as little as 10 months. So explore how you can become excellent in enrollment management at acu.edu/graduate. You know, if students are leaving your college visit with inspiration, not just information, a Welcome to College visit audit will reveal what your visitors are really hearing and what they should be hearing. Contact Justin Baer via Twitter at welcome2college. Or email Justin at welcome2college.com for more information. And Chegg Enrollment Services, formerly Zinch, is hosting a special webinar on September 23rd showcasing their new Match Plus algorithm. New algorithm uses data provided by students and collected during their visits across the Chegg network to help colleges save time by finding students interested in them, save money by reaching students who need to learn more about them, and recruit smarter by focusing on students who are the best fit for the institution at the height of their interest. And you can tweet at Social Admission to learn more about that. And that is, again, a webinar on September 23rd. So it's time to welcome in our guests, and with that I would like to bring in from Omni Update Lance Merker and from Noel Levitz, Stephanie Geyer. Afternoon or morning in some case, folks.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Chris.
So, we were talking before the show many years ago when I was a young admissions counselor at my last job. Our vice president for enrollment gave me a report. She said, "Hey, we got all this stuff from Noel Levitz. I think you should take a look at it." And I said, "What the heck is a Noel Levitz?" I had no idea, as a 25-year-old, that there was actually research being conducted in higher education and enrollment. As the years have gone by, I've become a big fan of specifically this EExpectations report and everything that goes into it. As an enrollment marketer, it is really, really fascinating information. The things that we sort of think we know anecdotally to see how it really, really happens out in the real world with actual research data. So, let's talk, if we would, a little bit about the history of where this came from.
Sure. I'll get us started there. Back in 2000, probably late 2004, early 2005, I was sitting at a conference table at Noel Levitz with some partners, and we were puzzling over what was happening with the internet, trends emerging with email. We didn't really have social media back then. Or not a whole lot of it that made a lot of sense. And so we kind of went back to our roots at Noel Levitz, which is how can we get some data to help our clients make good decisions about what to do with their website. And so I was given some funding and a whole lot of support and eventually some great partners like Omni Update to help us go out into the marketplace and say, hey, you prospective students and parents. What can we do to make this experience a little bit more fruitful for you? What do you like? What don't you like? What kinds of things are meaningful to you? And we've been at it ever since. In fact, in 2015, we'll be celebrating our 10-year anniversary. That's a whole bunch of data to sift through, and the team has been working on some, I think, serious looks back at what has happened, certainly looking forward to thinking about what we want to study next, and some funny things too to reflect on what were we saying 10 years ago that is now completely absurd or obtuse. Think MySpace as a clue.
We were talking about that this morning, actually.
Yeah, the landscape certainly changes very quickly, but when you have the opportunity to look back over a decade, it's mind-boggling.
Great. Lance, your thoughts? Anything you want to add?
Well, we've been a happy participant in this for the past 6 years now, I think, and it's been terrific. Yeah, there's been a terrific amount of data that's come out of this over the last 10 years. I think we've really fine-tuned it just here in the last 5 years to be incredibly helpful and comparative year over year. So we've been a very happy participant in this.
You know, I'll throw in that I feel like EExpectations as a research, a survey essentially at its core, has helped us kind of create a little bit of community, certainly through Twitter and folks tweeting out during our live presentations, hopefully here as well. But as we're on college campuses, as we're at conference events, having people come up and pitch question ideas to us is something I couldn't be happier about. So I guess I'd make that offer now. Anybody that's watching or listening today, if you have some ideas for us about questions that you'd like to see us ask, get them to me. And I have a file. It's started for 2015 already. I'd love to hear from you.
As long as you don't ask any questions about MySpace. We don't even want to know. Although that actually might be funny. I don't know. I did, by the way, I just tweeted out the link from the Higher Ed Live, at Higher Ed Live, to the whole history of the EExpectation survey. So you can go back and look at what kinds of folks were doing in 2005 and 2006. But what are the major findings in this year's report? What do we need to know?
A couple of things that I'll hit on and ask Lance to chime in on too, and I'm going to peek at some notes here. The study this year was with 1,000 high school seniors and 500 or so parents of high school seniors. And so we're looking at results for both of those groups independently, but then the juxtaposition of their results together. And a couple of things that I think are interesting. The number of students who are looking at your college and university websites using these devices is only increasing. Right now it's at 71% for students and 45% for parents. That's not going to change. And we do see evidence that more and more students are getting access to these devices on a regular basis, even at a higher level than their parents. So thinking about mobile, I know we've been beating that drum for a while, but there's still so many institutions that don't yet have responsive sites or adaptive, haven't been thinking about that strategically. So I think that that's important. And I think I'd carry the mobile theme over into email. Email use among students actually increased from last year to this year. So going to campus and still doing a little bit of arm wrestling about whether or not email is a viable communication tool, it still happens, but the data suggests, and I think again through mobile, that email is still an important resource for us, and so the trick there is making sure that your email messages are optimized for mobile users, and that's a little bit of work. And then finally, I'd say that the big story in social media is that every resource that we tested went up in terms of use, and the implications specifically for Facebook for parents are really interesting as well. So there's some quick highlights. I know we'll get into some more details in a few minutes. Lance, did I miss anything?
Well, a couple things. I kind of represent the website of the house here, and so we watch these trends very carefully every year. And Stephanie's right. Everything in social media went up, But the thing that I think was also very important to point out here is that the importance of the website went up as well. In fact, we asked some questions about how much the website, or what were the most influential aspects of the recruiting process and what they felt was most influential to them. And we figured that because social media usage was going up so much, that things like Facebook would come up even larger. But really, the website was considerably more important to them than anything that was mentioned on social media. So it was the official message from the college that was still so important. And we saw this through web and email and all different aspects of communications. So social usage is definitely going up. Mobile usage is going up as well. And as Stephanie pointed out, that's huge this year. In fact, the number of students that are looking at your website on a mobile device continues to increase. And smartphones, not just a mobile device, but one that can really adapt to the message that you're sending out on the web. It's a web browser that they're using on a mobile device. And these numbers increased dramatically. We're well north of 50% now of students that said they had looked at your website on a mobile device either today or sometime this week. So these devices are incredibly important for you to take notice of and look at what your website is doing when being viewed on this type of device.
Yeah, I mean, I can't echo that enough. And you know, we do a lot of work here on our end, surveying our own students, and we found the same thing. And I think that's important. I think it's important to look at those national trends and to see how that really affects your institution. And we've surveyed our incoming class for the last 5 years, and the numbers, that's one of the stats where, at least here, and it could be just our proximity to New York City, where it seems like a lot of our students are very mobile friendly, having that mobile presence is so very, very, very important for us as an institution, because that's where our students are. The other thing I think that was, you know, I feel like we've been talking about email being dead for years, and it hasn't actually died yet, as far as I can tell.
Right.
I had this discussion with a guest a couple of months ago, and my recommendation to my colleagues out in the field, if you feel like email is dead, feel free to stop using it. We, however, are going to continue to use it, and we'll just get all the students, and that'll be that. So,
spoken like a true admissions pirate, Chris.
Right. That's where the admissions side of me comes back sometimes.
Good.
So we know that the website is important, and I think you know, you made the point that sort of having that sort of official presence. It's one thing to, you know, tweet about a football game or tweet about an event on campus or whatever, but students still, I mean, this is you're talking about a major financial investment. And students, I think, are more savvy now in 2014-15 than they have been, and they sort of understand where social media fits into the equation of, you know, learning about student life and learning about the kinds of offerings you have and what it's like to be on campus. But they still want that sort of from the horse's mouth, real official website kind of a presence.
It's true. I think that I hear anecdotally when I'm sitting in focus groups or user tests with students, with parents, that the idea that the website is an early go-to for users as they're exploring their options, especially, and the expectation that the site is going to work beautifully for them is definitely present. When we're on campus and we're working through site development projects, as I do very often with Lance's team at Omni Update and their OU Campus CMS, I get into a lot of deep discussions about whom we're serving on the website, and institutions very often try and err on the side of democracy when it comes to dialing up what their homepage nav is going to be. And I think, you know, a firm believer in democracy, but not when it comes to this. I think that that's where we need to go forward boldly to say prospective students and decision influencers are our primary user group. And the sites that do that, that accomplish that really well, let me give a shout out. Embry-Riddle just relaunched their site. Gorgeous, gorgeous. And it is full on just beautifully directed at prospective students with the content that they need, answers to the questions that they're bringing. So the user, you know, mom and dad sitting in the middle of the country somewhere, maybe with some college experience, maybe not, they don't have in their mind that the college that they're looking at has to also serve internal markets, or that they have to care about alumni. And it sure enough isn't that we don't care about them too, but if we're coming up with good site development strategies, we know that we have to choose the primary market. And our market that is going to help us keep our enrollments up is expecting that the site is going to perform for them too. They're a little bit myopic, maybe a little bit like a toddler in that way, that it's all about them, but we've got to deliver.
Yeah, if I can add to that, you know, the website itself is definitely the most influential resource that's been noted over the last couple of years, and that's been increasing. But it's also the most stated as the most reliable resource. So 97% of college-bound high school seniors in this year's survey said that the website was the most reliable source of information. So this should be and needs to be your most important landing information of everything, no matter how you're directing students to information about your college, through view books, through social media, through live engagement. This is really what they're expecting to have the most reliable source of information. And it also changes their perception of who you are. And this is a question that we've tried to get at in a couple of different ways over the years. But this year, 67% of college-bound high school seniors said that the website changed their perception of the quality of the education they would receive at your institution. So that's pretty remarkable if you think about how important it is, not just in influence and reliability, but in terms of what the students are expecting to receive in terms of the education is influenced also by the quality of your website.
And you know, and as just a person who uses the web for things, it's the same way you do it for, you know, I can't tell you how many times my wife and I were looking for, you know, we're trying to find a restaurant, and we find a restaurant that doesn't have an easy to read menu online, and you're just going to get frustrated by that and say, well, forget that place. And it does, the perception of the quality of the institution, yeah, can absolutely reflect, should reflect on the website, and vice versa. I had a colleague last week, a couple of weeks ago, share a link to a department webpage that was housed within the school webpage, and it would look like it was an old GeoCities site, and you know, flashing images and all sorts of crazy things. And you've got to be current. You've got to get the information in a way that students are used to seeing it, and they can find it, and that authenticity is so very important.
That's exactly right, and the data really proves that out.
Mm-hmm. We do make really split decisions, I think, based on things like Yelp. I mean, going back to your restaurant analogy, and I worry that a lot of institutions are going to miss out on gathering inquiries and engaging prospective students if those first few seconds aren't really effective and intuitive.
Very, very good point. So I want to go back to email for a second, since it's dead, and but yet it's not, because the survey tells us that emails are right up there with the web as far as reliability from the survey.
It's true, yeah. So last year, 82% of our high school seniors said that they were using email on a regular basis. This year, 93% of them. So an 11-point gain. Really, I think we just need to stop talking about whether or not we use email and begin more constructive conversations about how we use it, where it fits into the flow, how email messages at the top of the funnel when we're working on conversion are different than at the bottom of the funnel where we're working on yield and trying to shore up some melt. I think they're more productive, more interesting conversations. Another important bit of data is that 98% of both students and parents said that they would open a message from a school that they're considering, but 60% said that, of the students in particular, said that they would open messages from schools that they don't know yet. So still an opportunity to use email on the prospecting side.
And that's, I mean, talk to any parent of a college, a high school student, and they'll tell you what their kid's email box looks like with 50 different messages from 50 different colleges sort of all in there. And that's why, as you said, it's important to be smart about how we do what we do and not just volume.
Yeah, for sure. There were some really interesting discussions as we were constructing the survey, and I was talking with my team, and in particular my turnkey email team. I was just asking them to look at the questions we'd planned to ask and what was happening, and they talked to me about this evidence that they were seeing that students were hoarding emails, meaning that we might send out an email on behalf of a client on January 1st, and maybe by about the 10th we'd wrap up the analysis of the performance for that particular message, looking at open rate, engagement rate, things like that. Well, come end of March, we'd be looking back across the data for the quarter, and we'd see that a whole bunch of students all of a sudden were opening up a message that was now effectively 2 months old, sitting in their email box. Enough volume that this was happening that we noticed. So we added a question in this year to kind of help us suss out what they were doing with email messages once we got them, or once we got them into their email boxes. And so students, 83% of them said that they were saving them, and 75% said that of the parents said that they were doing that. When it came to deleting, just 13% of students said that they actually deleted messages, while about a third of the parents said that they were. It looks like about half of both markets are using folders. So if you're an Outlook user, maybe you use folders to manage your volume of email. I know I try to. And so that was happening as well. Parents were more likely to be forwarding messages ostensibly to their students, at a rate of about 40%. So some interesting habits, and implying that students are hanging on to things a little bit longer than we would expect, storing them away like acorns for the winter, perhaps.
I mean, I would have to assume that a lot of us now are tracking our email usage, the volume that we're doing, whether it's be through a third party or whoever. And so very important to take a look at the kinds of messages that do well. And maybe look back and see the messages that are still doing well or continue to do well even after they've been out several months. That's an interesting stat.
Yeah, it was a surprise. That's what we love about data.
I know, exactly. It tells you things. That's why we do it, right?
Right.
One of the latest buzz pieces has been text messaging and how to fit that into the flow of things. What have you guys found when it comes to texting?
I'll jump in, and Lance, ask you to add in too, but in general we've seen an uptick in students, and now we see parents above 50% willing to allow colleges and universities to send them text messages. Now, we know that the devil's in the doing, so are we talking about an individual counselor texting an individual student on a one-off basis, or a larger texting kind of blast program? If you've not piloted this at any level, I'd suggest that you start with the counselor in the one-off model. You want to make sure that the student is clear that they're opting into this, and you want to have record of that. But in the blast arena, if you've not tried it yet, I would strongly suggest you work at the bottom half of the funnel, perhaps starting with your accepted students. Some institutions, Loyola Chicago has a great program there where they text acceptance notifications, and they use video, and I think that's very compelling. And I think the kinds of messages that are important for students at that stage coming through text are also very supportive of their ongoing engagement.
Yeah, I mean, email's not dead, and texting is growing, and the students are saying, more than half of the students are saying that yes, they're willing to accept text text messages from the schools, from individuals at the schools, and yet they're not. So I agree with Stephanie. This is time to experiment. Do it right. Make sure that you've got it all dialed in so that it's legal and you're not breaking any of the rules that you need to adhere to when it comes to the cell phone carriers. But this is the time to experiment. It's gone over 50%. Students are saying, yes, we're very interested in email certainly, but also in texting from the institutions.
I think it's sort of the trend that we've seen in the last couple of pieces, whether it's the website, whether it's emails that you're sending out, whether it's text that you're sending out. It's about content. It's about making sure that you're thinking about what you're doing and really making sure that the information that's getting out there is of value to your students and not just doing it just to do it. Say, oh, we need to text. EExpectations says we need to text. Let's start sending out text messages.
Oh, I hope nobody quotes you there. That would be a misrepresentation.
That's not how it works?
That's not how it works.
Right.
So consistency in the message is so important across all channels, whether that's email, the web, social media, texting. You really need to think about an integrated process by which all of the content is consistently as good as it can be. And consistency in itself is a key to that, and safeguards against doing the wrong thing. So integrating the process is really, really important.
I'd echo that. I think for anything that you add into the mix, having that kind of blueprint or plan so that it matches up, that your messages are working well from email into the website, back out to social media and through the text is job number one. Job number two is, do you have the ability to measure then the effectiveness of it and what you're doing and how it connects back to the greater good of, hey, did we get more students into the app pool? Did we get more students into the accepted and enrolled status? So at the end of the day, we've got to be able to measure it, and that's sometimes a trick.
Yep, very good point. How about pay-per-click campaigns? There were some questions this year about advertising and all those kinds of things. What sorts of things did you find there?
Well, definitely time to explore this as well. I think that it's an area, if you want to stand out from your competitors, that if you can come up with some pilot work in paid interactive marketing, as we call it, or you might know it as pay-per-click, that would be great. Another bit of research that we do at Noel Levitz is called the E-Recruiting Practices Report, and this is a study that we do actually of people that might be watching this show right now, marketing and admissions professionals, and we're asking you, hey, what kinds of things are you doing to help recruit students using digital media, and how is it working? And so from that study, we saw that the highest rate of use in pay-per-click on search was with the four-year public segment at just 37%. 32% of privates and about 29% of two-year schools using pay-per-click on search. And then using pay-per-click or paid interactive on social media channels, we actually see kind of the inverse. Two-year schools at 37%, four-year privates at 36%, and four-year publics at about 31%. So that's a pretty big window of opportunity, if you are not doing this, to put together some experiments and try it out. We strongly recommend that you start with program-specific paid interactive marketing campaigns. Pick a cluster of programs or a handful, maybe 4 to 5 discrete programs, do some geo-targeting if that's appropriate, or some other demographics, and see what you can do. The other part of this is to make sure that you've got a really effective conversion experience through well-crafted landing pages. What we saw in the marketplace was that students held steady at about 30-31% of them telling us that they had clicked on a paid interactive marketing ad. And we asked parents for the first time this year, 19% of them said that they had clicked on an ad. And primarily that was happening in Google or Facebook as the two leading channels for those kinds of activities.
I think that, even though those numbers seem rather small, they're still sort of surprising to me, I would think. I mean, I think the perception of the schools that are advertising on Facebook are not, and I suppose that's where the geo-targeting piece comes in. I suppose the kinds of ads that I may be seeing in my Facebook feed will be very different than the kinds of ads that 15, 16, 17-year-old will be seeing in their Facebook feed. So I suppose I can appreciate that.
We hope so, Chris.
Right. I guess that's the whole point, right? I realized halfway through asking the question, I was like, no, you dingbat. Like, why would I be the target of this stuff? Boy, I can't wait till my kids are old enough. They have no idea what they're getting themselves into. So speaking of social media, what are the big changes this year on the social media end?
Lance, I've been talking a lot. How about if you jump in here and I'll add some color commentary?
Sure. Well, the big news is, as Stephanie said originally, is that all aspects of social media spiked this year, not just where you would expect it, but areas like Snapchat probably was one of the biggest gainers. Maybe that's not a surprise. What do you do with that? I'm not sure. I'm going to give you advice on that right now. But Facebook certainly, Twitter certainly, YouTube certainly. The media-rich experience that students expect nowadays, the bar has just been risen dramatically because of all of these things. You've got Vine, you've got things that are just in their face every day, rich media, very interactive, very dynamic, and of course your presence in these areas needs to be well thought out. You don't want to do something crazy necessarily, but sometimes maybe it's appropriate. You need to think about the message being well crafted and consistent with what your school represents, but it needs to then adapt, at least in design, to the type of environment, the type of social environment that you're putting that out through. So think about that as you're looking at the statistics that have come in now. There are over a dozen different social media channels that are discussed in the EExpectations report. And as I said, they all increased, and some of them quite dramatically.
Mm-hmm. I would echo that. I'd say if you've been shy about Twitter, it's time to get over that and get in there. Certainly opportunity with Instagram, especially in the connectivity with Facebook, which you're probably already using. Google Plus, I think, is interesting. That came on strong at about 19% 2 years ago, dropped down to about 5% last year, and we thought, oh, well, that's over. But it was above 30% this year. And Google Plus offers some opportunity to support your search engine optimization goals, too. So I think definitely worth some effort there as well. The trick, of course, is that because Google Plus is so similar in ways to Facebook, we sometimes see clients and client partners trying to duplicate, take a post from Facebook and slam it into Google Plus. Please don't do that. Google abhors duplicate content, and you're going to make more trouble for yourself than benefit, so avoid that.
Yeah, you definitely want to be aware of the limitations on the different media. I mean, as always, we can do shows and shows on social media specific kinds of things. But yeah, again, always goes back to knowing your brand and knowing what's out there. It's not that I've always been the advocate. It's not necessarily about the specific tools, but about your message. And if your message will play well on Instagram, there's no reason for you not to be using it. These media are designed to be easy to use, and so there's no reason not to be out there, really. So let's talk about the mobile piece a little bit. What sorts of trends are we seeing statistically when it comes to mobile phone usage? As we said at the outset, we know it's there. I mean, everybody's got this in their pocket, and students do also. I just literally, as I was watching this, watching the feed, a stat came up from Pew in my thread. Where'd it go? 83% of young folks, and this is 18 to 29, but still, 18 to 29, 83% have a smartphone. That's from earlier in 2014. So there's, again, no reason not to be mobile these days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, we saw a huge rise in the use of mobile this year. Year over year, from 2013 to 2014, smartphone usage rose for students, 48% smartphones. Again, the most modern web-enabled phones are smartphones. And that rose from 48% in 2013 to 67% in 2014. So a huge jump there, more than parents in terms of the survey results. And older phones keep dropping off. So we've asked the question every year as to whether or not they could view web pages on their mobile device. And the number of cell phones with web access, as we call it in the survey, dropped from 21% to 14%. Tablet usage increased, but not much. It went from 6% to 8%. And parents at 13%. So it seems the parents are the ones that end up using the tablets more than the students. And the students have that ultra mobile small device in their pocket. And then iPod Touch, which we've asked for the last several years because it's a some of them are web-enabled devices as well, dropped as well. So that went from 8% to 5%. So that was all picked up in the real smartphone devices that are now in the pockets of 67% of your prospective students. So this has huge implications into what you're doing in terms of design. We've tried to fish out a little bit of information about whether or not design was important to them. But it shows up in a couple of different areas in the survey that are really, really important. One is in terms of what they expect to be able to do on your website with a mobile device. For instance, filling out a form. Filling out a form is something that you probably want them to be doing, whether it's to sign up for a campus tour or for an early stage inquiry form or what have you. And the students just in general said that they have not signed up with a form, or at least not as often as perhaps you'd like them to, less than 50%. And when asked whether they would, the questions were much higher. For instance, would you fill out a form on a mobile device for a campus visit? 55% said yes. So maybe it's time to look at these forms on a mobile device, in addition to all of your other responsive design initiatives, to make sure that they're really working as well as you want them to be working, because the students are carrying these devices and they do want to fill out these forms while they're mobile.
I think that it's really important to remember that at any moment they can be using multiple devices. And you know, if they see something that engages them here, it may inspire them to, you know, get their laptop out, fire it up, and dig in a little bit deeper. And so we want to be ready for that. We also imagine scenarios where they're looking on their desktop or laptop, and then they've got to go, and they want to continue that exploration as they're sitting on a bus or, you know, in traffic or whatever. There's fluidity between the desktop and the mobile environment, and we want consistency. I think that's where well-crafted responsive can play an important role. You know, just helped Eastern Florida State College kind of retrofit their website into responsive, and I'm really excited about what that means for them in terms of engaging students and getting them into, as Lance was saying, those call to action forms that are so important for us. So, you know, if there's a little bit of homework for you to take away from the show today, it's go, you know, get your phone out and start filling out forms on your site and see what happens. You know, have your web team on speed dial so that they can help you suss out solutions to the challenges that you're likely going to experience there. Yeah. And pay attention. One more thought. Pay attention to the thank you page. I'll tell you, that is the easiest way to fix an experience. A lot of institutions just, you know, they spend a lot of time thinking about what fields they're going to ask on the form. Hopefully they're spending time in developing the forms responsively, but then they get to the thank you page and they say, yeah, we got it, carry on. And that's really not the best way to go. So put a little more energy into those thank you pages, folks.
Absolutely. Everything counts. So I remembered, as Lance, as you were talking about the mobile piece, having seen a study flash through earlier today, and I just tweeted it out from at CDorso. There's a Pearson study. They studied almost 2,500 kids, grades 4 to 12 in New York City, and more than half of the students that they surveyed, grades 4 to 12, own a mobile device. So they're out there, they're using them, and I know it's not a surprise, but it's more than just, you know, having it, being able to pull it up on the website, but really have that full functionality in a way that they can actually get something out of it.
Now,
we're running short on time, and I don't mean to cut you off, but some closing thoughts. Who wants to go first?
Lance, why don't you start, and I'll jump in.
Well, you know, we ended on mobile, and I think is probably the most important piece of all. They're using these mobile devices more than their parents are, and they're viewing your web pages on these mobile devices. We asked questions to make sure they were actually looking at college websites, and certainly they are. They find that the experience needs to be consistent. We know that. It needs to be effective, and responsive design is a great way to get there. So I think that's a huge takeaway this year in the survey, is that there's a big jump there. Certainly a big jump in social as well. Not sure how to use that right, but I think the management of content through all the channels is the key to that. Get that right first, because you're going to have people that are going to want to use this information to start using social channels and start to use them in creative ways. But get the content management effective first, so that what they are using on social media is consistent with the landing pages, consistent with the type of institution that you want to represent on all of these various channels.
I'd echo that for sure. I think, you know, the content strategy piece is what I would add, in that we want to understand how a user might experience content that they find on the web, what opportunities we lead them away from the web or bring them into the web. So, you know, think about it maybe from the categories of questions that the users have. So look at it in the context of program. Look at it in the context of cost. Think about your mode of delivery or the messages that you're sending around about location. Think about admissions process, admissibility, and then of course think about fit. And I think that's where the social channels kind of lead the way in driving students to experience and explore that and affirm that it's the right kind of culture, the right kind of vibe for them. But look at how that's all knit together, and then make sure, this is Noel Levitt's talking, make sure you've got a way to measure against that and look at the performance in each of those channels.
That's so true, and I think the measurement piece is a really valid point. You know, you can't just do it, you got to have a reason for doing it.
Again and again.
The ends justify the means kind of deal. All right, well, I want to thank Lance and Stephanie for joining me on the show this afternoon. Admissions Live will be back in 2 weeks with my co-host, Nicole Lentini. Thanks, as always, to our program sponsors, M. Stoner, Chegg, ACU, Welcome to College. Coming up tomorrow on Higher Ed Live, we were off last week for the holiday, so tomorrow on Higher Ed Live, what would a digital-first advancement operation look like? Speaking of digital kinds of things, so join Andrew as he welcomes Mayan Plout from Oberlin, Harmony Farrow from TCU, and Adam Miller from Stanford. As always, get reminders about this and other great shows by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. You can browse the archives online at higheredlive.com, and of course the Higher Ed Live podcast on iTunes. I'm Chris Dorso. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back next month with more from Higher Ed Live.